Welcome to Exploration Dreamland, a quiet read aloud of the writings of explorers of the real world and the worlds of imagination. Drop anchor, relax into your comfortable bunk, and drift off to Dreamland with us as we read a lightly edited version of The Blazing World by Margaret Cavendish from 1666, considered to be the first science fiction book written by a woman. It's a fascinating glimpse into the ideas of science and philosophy at that time. The book will be read in order, so if you would like to begin at the beginning, please start with Season 5, Episode 87. If you would like to stay in touch between episodes, you can follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Facebook at Exploration Dreamland. If you have a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, it helps more than you know. You can also hear our episodes on YouTube. If you are listening there, please like our episodes and leave a comment for us. We love hearing from you. Now, take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, relax any tension in your muscles. Close your eyes, snuggle into your sleeping space, and listen to tonight's tale. "This monarch," said the Empress, "I have a great mind to see." Then they both went, and in a short time arrived into his dominions. But coming into the metropolitan city, the Empress's soul observed many gallants go into a house, and enquiring of the Duchess's soul what house that was, she told her it was one of the theatres where comedies and tragedies were acted. The Empress asked whether they were real. "No," said the Duchess, "they are feigned." Then the Empress desired to enter into the theatre, and when she had seen the play, the Duchess asked her how she liked that recreation. "I like it very well," said the Empress, "but I observe that the actors make a better show than the spectators, and the scenes a better than the actors, and the music and dancing is more pleasant and acceptable than the play itself. For I see the scenes stand for wit, the dancing for humor, and the music is the chorus." "I am sorry," replied the Duchess, "to hear your Majesty say so. For if the wits of this part of the world should hear you, they would condemn you." "What?" said the Empress. "Would they condemn me for preferring a natural face before a signpost, or a natural humor before an artificial dance, or music before a true and profitable relation?" "As for relation," replied the Duchess, "our poets defy and condemn it into a chimney corner, fitter for old women's tales than theatres." "Why," said the Empress, "do not your poets' actions comply with their judgments? For their plays are composed of old stories, either of Greek or Roman, or some new-found world." The Duchess answered Her Majesty that it was true that all or most of their plays were taken out of old stories, but yet they had new actions, which being joined to old stories, together with the addition of new prologues, scenes, music, and dancing, made new plays. After this, both the souls went to the court, where all the royal family was together, attended by the chief of the nobles of their dominions, which made a very magnificent show. And when the soul of the Empress viewed the king and queen, she seemed to be in amaze, which the Duchess's soul perceiving, asked the Empress how she liked the king, the queen, and all the royal race. She answered that in all the monarchs she had seen in that world, she had not found so much majesty and affability mixed so exactly together, that none did overshadow or eclipse the other. And as for the queen, she said that virtue sat triumphant in her face, and piety was dwelling in her heart, and that all the royal family seemed to be endued with a divine splendor. But when she had heard the king discourse, she believed that Mercury and Apollo had been his celestial instructors. And my dear lord and husband, added the Duchess, has been his earthly governor. But after some short stay in the court, the Duchess's soul grew very melancholy. The Empress asking the cause of her sadness, she told her that she had an extreme desire to converse with the soul of her noble lord and dear husband, and that she was impatient of a longer stay. The Empress desired the Duchess to have but patience so long until the king, the queen, and the royal family were retired, and then she would bear her company to her lord and husband's soul, who at that time lived in the country some 112 miles off, which she did, and thus these two souls went towards those parts of the kingdom where the Duke of Newcastle was. But one thing I forgot all this while, which is, that although thoughts are the natural language of souls, yet by reason souls cannot travel without vehicles. They use such language as the nature and propriety of their vehicles require, and the vehicles of those two souls being made of the purest and finest sort of air, and of a human shape, this purity and fineness was the cause that they could neither be seen nor heard by any human creature, whenas, had they been of some grosser sort of air, the sound of the air's language would have been as perceptible as the blowing of Zephyrus. And now to return to my former story. When the Empress's and the Duchess's soul were travelling into Nottinghamshire, for that was the place where the Duke did reside, passing through the forest of Sherwood, the Empress's soul was very much delighted with it, as being a dry, plain, and woody place, very pleasant to travel in, both in winter and summer, for it is neither much dirty nor dusty at no time. At last they arrived at Welbeck, a house where the Duke dwelled, surrounded all with wood, so close and full that the Empress took great pleasure and delight therein, and told the Duchess she never had observed more wood in so little compass in any part of the kingdom she had passed through. The truth is, said she, there seems to be more wood on the seas, she meaning the ships, than on the land. The Duchess told her the reason was that there had been a long civil war in that kingdom, in which most of the best timber trees and principal palaces were ruined and destroyed. And my dear lord and husband, said she, has lost by it half his woods, besides many houses, land, and movable goods, so that all the loss out of his particular estate did amount to above £500,000. I wish, said the Empress, he had some of the gold that is in the blazing world to repair his losses. The Duchess most humbly thanked her Imperial Majesty for her kind wishes, but, said she, wishes will not repair his ruins. However, God has given my noble lord and husband great patience, by which he bears all his losses and misfortunes. At last they entered into the Duke's house, a habitation not so magnificent as useful. And when the Empress saw it, "Has the Duke," said she, "no other house but this?" "Yes," answered the Duchess, "some 5 miles from this place he has a very fine castle called Bolsover." "That place, then," said the Empress, "I desire to see." "Alas," replied the Duchess, "it is but a naked house, and unclothed of all furniture." "However," said the Empress, "I may see the manner of its structure and building." "That you may," replied the Duchess, and as they were thus discoursing, the Duke came out of the house into the court, to see his horses of manage, whom when the Duchess's soul perceived, she was so overjoyed that her aerial vehicle became so splendrous as if it had been enlightened by the sun, by which we may perceive that the passions of souls or spirits can alter their bodily vehicles. Then these 2 ladies' spirits went close to him, but he could not perceive them, and after the Empress had observed that art of manage, she was much pleased with it, and commended it as a noble pastime, and an exercise fit and proper for noble and heroic persons. But when the Duke was gone into the house again, those 2 souls followed him, where the Empress observing that he went to the exercise of the sword, and was such an excellent and unparalleled master thereof, she was as much pleased with that exercise as she was with the former. But the Duchess's soul being troubled, that her dear lord and husband used such a violent exercise before meat, for fear of overheating himself, without any consideration of the Empress's soul, left her aerial vehicle and entered into her lord. The Empress's soul, perceiving this, did the like, and then the Duke had 3 souls in one body, and had there been some such souls more, the Duke would have been like the Grand Signor in his seraglio, only it would have been a Platonic seraglio. But the Duke's soul, being wise, honest, witty, complaisant, and noble, afforded such delight and pleasure to the Empress's soul by his conversation, that these 2 souls became enamoured of each other, which the Duchess's soul perceiving, grew jealous at first, but then considering that no adultery could be committed amongst Platonic lovers, and that Platonism was divine, as being derived from divine Plato, cast forth of her mind that idea of jealousy. Then the conversation of these 3 souls was so pleasant that it cannot be expressed. For the Duke's soul entertained the Empress's soul with scenes, songs, music, witty discourses, pleasant recreations, and all kinds of harmless sports, so that the time passed away faster than they expected. At last a spirit came and told the Empress that although neither the Emperor nor any of his subjects knew that her soul was absent, yet the Emperor's soul was so sad and melancholy for want of his own beloved soul, that all the imperial court took notice of it. Wherefore he advised the Empress's soul to return into the blazing world, into her own body she left there, which both the Duke's and Duchess's soul was very sorry for, and wished that, if it had been possible, the Empress's soul might have stayed a longer time with them. But seeing it could not be otherwise, they pacified themselves. But before the Empress returned into the blazing world, the Duchess desired a favour of her, to wit, that she would be pleased to make an agreement between her noble lord and Fortune. "Why," said the Empress, "are they enemies?" "Yes," answered the Duchess, and they have been so ever since I have been his wife. Nay, I have heard my lord say that she hath crossed him in all things, ever since he could remember. I am sorry for that, replied the Empress, but I cannot discourse with fortune without the help of an immaterial spirit, and that cannot be done in this world, for I have no fly nor birdmen here to send into the region of the air, where, for the most part, their habitations are. The Duchess said she would entreat her lord to send an attorney or lawyer to plead his cause. Fortune will bribe them, replied the Empress, and so the Duke may chance to be cast. Wherefore the best way will be for the Duke to choose a friend on his side, and let Fortune choose another, and try whether by this means it be possible to compose the difference. The Duchess said they will never come to an agreement unless there be a judge or umpire to decide the case. A judge, replied the Empress, is easy to be had, but to get an impartial judge is a thing so difficult that I doubt we shall hardly find one, for there is none to be had, neither in nature nor in hell, but only from heaven. And how to get such a divine and celestial judge, I cannot tell. Nevertheless, if you will go along with me into the blazing world, I'll try what may be done. 'Tis my duty, said the Duchess, to wait on your Majesty, and I shall most willingly do it, for I have no other interest to consider. Then the Duchess spake to the Duke concerning the difference between him and Fortune, and how it was her desire that they might be friends. The Duke answered that for his part he had always with great industry sought her friendship, but as yet he could never obtain it, for she had always been his enemy. However, said he, I'll try and send my 2 friends, Prudence and Honesty, to plead my cause. Then these 2 friends went with the Duchess and the Empress into the blazing world, for it is to be observed that they are somewhat like spirits, because they are immaterial, although their actions are corporeal. And after their arrival there, when the Empress had refreshed herself and rejoiced with the Emperor, she sent her flymen for some of the spirits, and desired their assistance to compose the difference between Fortune and the Duke of Newcastle. But they told her Majesty that Fortune was so inconstant that although she would perhaps promise to hear their cause pleaded, yet it was 1,000 to 1 whether she would ever have the patience to do it. Nevertheless, upon her Majesty's request, they tried their utmost, and at last prevailed with Fortune so far that she chose folly and rashness for her friends, for they could not agree in choosing a judge, until at last, with much ado, they concluded that truth should hear and decide the cause. Thus all being prepared, and the time appointed, both the Empress and the Duchess's soul went to hear them plead. And when all the immaterial company was met, Fortune, standing upon a golden globe, made this following speech. Noble friends, we are met here to hear a cause pleaded concerning the difference between the Duke of Newcastle and myself. And though I am willing, upon the persuasions of the ambassadors of the Empress, the immaterial spirits, to yield to it, yet it had been fit the Duke's soul should be present also to speak for herself. But since she is not here, I shall declare myself to his wife and his friends, as also to my friends, especially the Empress, to whom I shall chiefly direct my speech. First, I desire your Imperial Majesty may know that this Duke, who complains or exclaims so much against me, hath been always my enemy. For he has preferred honesty and prudence before me, and slighted all my favours. Nay, not only thus, but he did fight against me, and preferred his innocence before my power. His friends' honesty and prudence, said he most scornfully, are more to be regarded than inconstant fortune, who is only a friend to fools and knaves, for which neglect and scorn, whether I have not just reason to be his enemy, your Majesty may judge yourself. After Fortune had thus ended her speech, the Duchess's soul rose from her seat, and spake to the immaterial assembly in this manner. Noble friends, I think it fit, by your leave, to answer Lady Fortune in the behalf of my noble lord and husband, since he is not here himself. And since you have heard her complaint concerning the choice my lord made of his friends, and the neglect and disrespect he seemed to cast upon her, give me leave to answer that, first, concerning the choice of his friends, he has proved himself a wise man in it. And as for the disrespect and rudeness her ladyship accuses him of, I dare say he is so much a gentleman that I am confident he would never slight, scorn, or disrespect any of the female sex in all his lifetime, but was such a servant and champion for them that he ventured life and estate in their service. But being of an honest, as well as an honourable nature, he could not trust Fortune with that which he preferred above his life, which was his reputation. By reason, Fortune did not side with those that were honest and honourable, but renounced them. And since he could not be of both sides, he chose to be of that which was agreeable both to his conscience, nature, and education. For which choice Fortune did not only declare herself his open enemy, but fought with him in several battles, nay, many times hand to hand. At last, she being a powerful princess, and as some believe a deity, overcame him, and cast him into a banishment, where she kept him in great misery, ruined his estate, and took away from him most of his friends. Nay, even when she favoured many that were against her, she still frowned on him, all which he endured with the greatest patience, and with that respect to Lady Fortune, that he did never in the least endeavour to disoblige any of her favourites, but was only sorry that he, an honest man, could find no favour in her court. And since he did never injure any of those she favoured, he neither was an enemy to her ladyship, but gave her always that respect and worship which belonged to her power and dignity, and is still ready at any time honestly and prudently to serve her. He only begs her ladyship would be his friend for the future, as she hath been his enemy in times past. As soon as the Duchess's speech was ended, folly and rashness started up, and both spake so thick and fast at once, that not only the assembly, but themselves were not able to understand each other. At which Fortune was somewhat out of countenance, and commanded them either to speak singly, or be silent. But Prudence told her ladyship she should command them to speak wisely as well as singly. Otherwise, said she, it were best for them not to speak at all. which Fortune resented very ill, and told Prudence she was too bold, and then commanded Folly to declare what she would have made known, but her speech was so foolish, mixed with such nonsense, that none knew what to make of it. Besides, it was so tedious that Fortune bid her to be silent, and commanded Rashness to speak for her, who began after this manner. Great Fortune, the Duchess of Newcastle has proved herself, according to report, a very proud and ambitious lady, in presuming to answer you her own self in this noble assembly without your command, in a speech wherein she did not only contradict you, but preferred honesty and prudence before you, saying that her lord was ready to serve you honestly and prudently, which presumption is beyond all pardon, and if you allow honesty and prudence to be above you, none will admire, worship, or serve you, but you'll be forced to serve yourself, and will be despised, neglected, and scorned by all, and from a deity become a miserable, dirty, begging mortal in a churchyard porch or nobleman's gate. Wherefore, to prevent such disasters, fling as many misfortunes and neglects on the Duke and Duchess of Newcastle and their 2 friends as your power is able to do. Otherwise prudence and honesty will be the chief and only moral deities of mortals. Rashness having thus ended her speech, Prudence rose and declared herself in this manner. Beautiful Truth, great Fortune, and you the rest of my noble friends, I am come a great and long journey in the behalf of my dear friend the Duke of Newcastle, not to make more wounds, but if it be possible, to heal those that are made already. Neither do I presume to be a deity, but my only request is, that you would be pleased to accept of my offering, I being a humble and devout supplicant. And since no offering is more acceptable to the gods than the offering of peace, in order to that I desire to make an agreement between Fortune and the Duke of Newcastle. Thus she spake, and as she was going up started Honesty, for she has not always so much discretion as she ought to have, and interrupted Prudence. I came not here, said she, to hear Fortune flattered, but to hear the cause decided between Fortune and the Duke. Neither came I hither to speak rhetorically and eloquently, but to propound the case plainly and truly, and I'll have you know that the Duke, whose cause we argue, was and is my foster son. For I, Honesty, bred him from his childhood, and made a perpetual friendship betwixt him and gratitude, charity, and generosity, and put him to school to Prudence, who taught him wisdom, and informed him in the rules of temperance, patience, justice, and the like. Then I put him into the University of Honor, where he learned all honorable qualities, arts, and sciences. Afterward I sent him to travel through the world of actions, and made observation his governor. And in those his travels he contracted a friendship with experience, all which made him fit for heaven's blessings and Fortune's favours. But she, hating all those that have merit, became his inveterate enemy, doing him all the mischief she could, until the God of justice opposed Fortune's malice, and pulled him out of those ruins she had cast upon him. For this God's favourites were the Duke's champions. Wherefore to be an enemy to him were to be an enemy to the God of justice. In short, the true cause of Fortune's malice to this Duke is, that he would never flatter her, for I, Honesty, did command him not to do it, or else he would be forced to follow all her inconstant ways, and obey all her unjust commands, which would cause a great reproach to him. But, on the other side, Prudence advised him not to despise Fortune's favours, for that would be an obstruction and hindrance to his worth and merit, and he, to obey both our advice and counsels, did neither flatter nor despise her, but was always humble and respectful to her, so far as honour, honesty, and conscience would permit. All which I refer to truth's judgment, and expect her final sentence. Fortune, hearing thus Honesty's plain speech, thought it very rude, and would not hearken to truth's judgment, but went away in a passion. At which both the Empress and Duchess were extremely troubled, for their endeavours should have no better effect. But Honesty chided the Duchess, and said she was to be punished for desiring so much Fortune's favours, for it appears, said she, that you mistrust the gods' blessings. At which the Duchess wept, answering Honesty that she did neither mistrust the gods' blessings, nor rely upon Fortune's favours, but desired only that her lord might have no potent enemies. The Empress, being much troubled to see her weep, told Honesty in anger she wanted the discretion of Prudence. For though you are commended, said she, yet you are apt to commit many indiscreet actions, unless Prudence be your guide. At which reproof Prudence smiled, and Honesty was somewhat out of countenance, but they soon became very good friends. And after the Duchess's soul had stayed some time with the Empress in the blazing world, she begged leave of her to return to her lord and husband, which the Empress granted her, upon condition she should come and visit her as often as conveniently she could, promising that she would do the same to the Duchess. Thus the Duchess's soul, after she had taken her leave of the Empress, as also of the spirits, who with great civility promised her that they would endeavour in time to make a peace and agreement between Fortune and the Duke, returned with Prudence and Honesty into her own world. But when she was just upon her departure, the Empress sent to her, and desired that she might yet have some little conference with her before she went, which the Duchess most willingly granted her Majesty, and when she came to wait on her, the Empress told the Duchess that she, being her dear platonic friend, of whose just and impartial judgment she had always a very great esteem, could not forbear, before she went from her, to ask her advice concerning the government of the blazing world. For, said she, although this world was very well and wisely ordered and governed at first, when I came to be Empress thereof, yet the nature of women being much delighted with change and variety, after I had received an absolute power from the Emperor, did somewhat alter the form of government from what I found it. But now perceiving that the world is not so quiet as it was at first, I am much troubled at it. Especially there are such continual contentions and divisions between the worm, bear, and fly men, the ape men, the satyrs, the spider men, and all others of such sorts, that I fear they'll break out into an open rebellion, and cause a great disorder and the ruin of the government. And therefore I desire your advice and assistance, how I may order it to the best advantage, that this world may be rendered peaceable, quiet, and happy, as it was before. Whereupon the Duchess answered that since she heard by her imperial majesty how well and happily the world had been governed when she first came to be empress thereof, she would advise her majesty to introduce the same form of government again, which had been before, that is, to have but one sovereign, one religion, one law, and one language, so that all the world might be but as one united family, without divisions, nay, like God and his blessed saints and angels. Otherwise, said she, it may in time prove as unhappy, nay, as miserable a world as that is from which I came, wherein are more sovereigns than worlds, and more pretended governors than government, more religions than gods, and more opinions in those religions than truths, more laws than rights, and more bribes than justices, more policies than necessities, and more fears than dangers, more covetousness than riches, more ambitions than merits, more services than rewards, more languages than wit, more controversy than knowledge, more reports than noble actions, and more gifts by partiality than according to merit. All which, said she, is a great misery, nay, a curse, which your blessed blazing world never knew, nor 'tis probable will never know of, unless your imperial majesty alter the government thereof from what it was when you began to govern it. And since your majesty complains much of the factions of the bear, fish, fly, ape, and worm men, the satyrs, spider-men, and the like, and of their perpetual disputes and quarrels, I would advise your majesty to dissolve all their societies. For 'tis better to be without their intelligences than to have an unquiet and disorderly government. The truth is, said she, wheresoever learning is, there is most commonly also controversy and quarrelling. For there be always some that will know more, and be wiser than others. Some think their arguments come nearer to truth, and are more rational than others. Some are so wedded to their own opinions that they'll never yield to reason, and others, though they find their opinion not firmly grounded upon reason, yet for fear of receiving some disgrace by altering them, will nevertheless maintain them against all sense and reason, which must needs breed factions in their schools, which at last break out into open wars, and draw sometimes an utter ruin upon a state or government. The Empress told the Duchess that she would willingly follow her advice, but she thought it would be an eternal disgrace to her to alter her own decrees, acts, and laws. To which the Duchess answered that it was so far from a disgrace as it would rather be for her Majesty's eternal honour to return from a worse to a better, and would express and declare her to be more than ordinary wise and good, so wise as to perceive her errors, and so good as not to persist in them, which few did. For which, said she, you will get a glorious fame in this world, and an eternal glory hereafter, and I shall pray for it so long as I live. Upon which advice the Empress's soul embraced and kissed the Duchess's soul with an immaterial kiss, and shed immaterial tears, that she was forced to part from her, finding her not a flattering parasite, but a true friend. And in truth, such was their platonic friendship, as these two loving souls did often meet and rejoice in each other's conversation. Stay tuned for the next section of The Blazing World by the Duchess of Newcastle. Please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast app. Keep in touch with us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and recommend us to anyone you know who could use a quiet break or a little help falling asleep. Exploration Dreamland is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Sarah Van Zaley. A big thank you to Project Gutenberg and LibriVox for helping me find many interesting publications. Thanks also to Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com for providing the theme music for this show. The title of this piece is Kalimba Relaxation Music, if you would like to visit his website to hear it in its entirety. Sweet dreams.